Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Let's Talk Live here on the LTL Media Channel. I am back. I'm back in action. Oh my God, 2025 has not started off well for me. I started out the year with a double root canal, and then I just caught that norovirus that's going around. But finally, today, I'm feeling about 80% better, and I'm definitely going to be going back to work tomorrow. So, I don't know if you all realize, but when I had Juna in here on Tuesday, I was literally at my worst. I felt so sick, but I felt terrible if I canceled on her again because I had to cancel the week prior because of my double root canal. But Tuesday, that's why I only did about an hour that night. I was miserable. I didn't feel good. But I still think overall it was a great interview. And yesterday was completely laid out, but here I am back in action. So wanted to bring a very special guest that has been a huge fan of a help to the channel here. I'm all discombobulated today. A huge help to the channel is retired Mass State Police Todd McGhee. I want to bring him in and talk about the recent Trooper Proctor hearing. And then also we'll get into, in the second half of the show, we'll talk a lot about the Enrique Delgado-Garcia case. So let's not wait too much longer. Let's bring in my friend here of the show. Let's bring in Todd McGhee. And if I can get the window here correct, Todd, how are you? Welcome to Let's Talk Live.
Hey, Brian. Good to see you, my friend.
Oh, man, it's been crazy here. Hang on. Everybody's saying no sound. I just want to make sure that our sound is good. Can you all hear me? Let's just wait and hear a yes or a no in the chat. And I apologize. Hang on one second here. Delay on my TV. Let's see. No sound. Yes. All right. Everybody can hear us. Good. All right. We're here. We're live. And welcome to the show. I think it's been probably your fourth or fifth time here, probably more than that. And again, just want to welcome you back and thank you for giving me your time. You've been very helpful. We actually went out, 2 weeks ago? We had a nice long meal of food and had some steaks and discussed a lot of things that are going on in Massachusetts, particularly to the Enrique Delgado-Garcia case. But it was such a fun evening to sit with you and break bread and get to know you like more in a personal setting than, what we've been doing here on these lives.
Yeah, it was good to be out, and just kind of the way the conversation went. We ended up around all these topics.
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about, and these cases that you've been covering have such unique applications. I mean, these things are unprecedented, in what we're seeing, and so there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so let's talk about. We'll first kick this off, and we'll talk about Trooper Proctor. And let me get this proper here. We'll talk a little bit about Trooper Proctor. So Wednesday was the official hearing of Trooper Proctor, and it's funny because I went into this thing I think a lot of people thought that this was going to be the be all end all with him. But I remember reading a report, and I tweeted about this just about a week prior to the hearing, that Christina Rex reported, WBZ said that there was actually going to be two trial dates. And I found that to be interesting. One was obviously yesterday, the 15th, but she also said February 10th. And I said, keep this in the back of your mind, people. This is not going to be the be all end all here. I think, in my opinion, I think this is going to be dragged out, and I think it will be dragged out past the Karen Reed trial. We know that he's also involved in another high profile case here in Massachusetts, is Brian Walsh, and that trial is not going to start until October of 2025 is the said date for that trial. But I just like to hear your opinion on this, Todd. And then maybe I have a presentation here. We can bring up actually what the process is that goes on inside one of these trial hearings. So what do you think about the Proctor hearing yesterday?
Yeah, many of us were waiting to hear kind of the final decision. And we're going to get into kind of the approach and the process. But, this is complex. And typically when there's misconduct that's been identified, and the internal affairs unit gets involved, and they go out and they do their fact-finding mission, they'll take that information and then present it to the trial board based on their findings. And, it's at that point where, um, decisions are made relatively in short order. So the only thing, my reaction to the two dates is that this is complex. You have a
Mm.
major trial that's happening in the Karen Reed case, and then you have the Brian Walsh matter, where you have a convicted murderer that is looking for anything to go on appeal. And my gut reaction is that um, you know leopards don't change the spots. So if there was certain misconduct in the Karen Reed trial, there probably is some smoking gun somewhere within the Walsh case. So that's what his attorneys are looking for. And I tell you, he won't get let off without another trial. But what a waste of taxpayer dollars!
Mm.
A waste of taxpayer dollars to have even the thought of another trial in behalf of Brian Walsh, who's an actual monster.
This is where I start thinking too. Do you think that, um, the Mass State Police is really scrambling here, to drag this out? It's kind of like, if you look at the Commonwealth, and let's just take this, if we were the Commonwealth, it's like, well, we kind of need Trooper Proctor involved in this because we have these two whole profile cases. Commonwealth's not going to obviously want to lose him as a witness, but I would think that if the Commonwealth's not going to call him, let's say in the Karen Reed trial, and I believe that they already said that in Brian Walsh's trial, they're not planning on calling him as a witness. But let's just say in Karen Reed's case, obviously 1.0, he was called as a witness the for the Commonwealth and defense. But I would think this time around, if he's not called to the Commonwealth, I would be pretty sure the defense is going to call him and want to expose him to this new jury with all the the disgusting things and the text messages that he said about Karen Reed. So I look at it and it's like, do you think that the Mass State Police and the Commonwealth is pretty much scrambling here now to see if they can stretch this thing out and get it past Karen Reed 2.0, with the April trial date? What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm in agreement with how you broke that down. I'll add the other wrinkle, if you will, and that is the Municipal Police Training Council, and they are the certifying body for police officers in Massachusetts. So they are 110% involved with this trial board to some degree. But once this trial board is done and complete, then they're going to weigh in as far as his certification status. And that's relatively new. When I came on as a police officer decades ago, you didn't have a certifying body. You were sworn in, you had your oath of office, and that was how you started your law enforcement career.
Mm.
In this particular case, we've seen police misconduct around the country, and this relatively new process of certifying police within a given state. That is part of the process, and even more so during the disciplinary side of things. So they're part of the equation as well, not just the DA Morrissey's office. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, which again makes this whole case so unique, with all the different layers and bumps along the road, so to speak.
Todd, why do you think it is that, since, like you said, it seemed so simple back then, the way that, officers get sworn in and they join the force and they go on to protect and serve. But now it seems like we supposedly, and you can see my air quotes here, have more things in place and structure and oversight to prevent more of these incidents like that. Like, let's just take in the case of Trooper Proctor, but it doesn't seem that those systems are working. Why is that? Why? What is your thought on that? If we have these systems in place to protect and to have more oversight and look into these things, it just seems like things kind of just get brushed by a lot of the time.
Well, albeit the process is slow, but the greater damage is police officers that exhibited civil rights violations, criminality, misconduct at an egregious level, gross negligence, for them to switch uniforms and work for another department, that's worse.
Sonia
So,
Massey's case.
yeah,
The
right.
the
So,
uh the the disgusting police officer, and I forget his name, but he was allowed to slip through the cracks in that case, and he changed departments I think 3 or 4 times until he landed where he did, and then ultimately that tragedy that happened to Sonia Massey.
well, in here you have it that not every state has the certification
Hmm.
process in place, right? So you do have someone like that individual who was able, in who literally was who resigned before he got fired by those 3 previous departments because of his misconduct. So that's here at least in Massachusetts. Some of the other Northeast states that have a certification process in place are trying to avoid greater harm with individuals who started their law enforcement career and couldn't handle the
Hmm.
authority and all those aspects of being a police officer.
Hmm. Let me just get this up. Amanda, thank you so much. She's been a member for 4 months. She said, glad to be catching Todd tonight. Thank you both. Well, thank you for being here. All right, Todd, let's do this. I have a little bit of a presentation that I made, and I think I might be pretty good at what I sourced here, putting this together. Todd can let me know if I'm yay or nay, but I wanted to go through an actual trial board process, and I think I broke it down in probably the most simplest form, and maybe you can opine on some of this if I'm right or wrong. So what I did was I put this little presentation together. So a state police trial board hearing typically involves an internal disciplinary process which a law enforcement officer, often a state trooper, faces charges of misconduct or violation of a department rules and regulation. And then it just said, here's an overview of what usually happens during a hearing. So one, the particular individual would get a notice of hearing. The officer involved is formally notified of charges against them and the date of the trial board. This given the officer time to prepare a defense or gather evidence. Can you opine a little bit on that, Todd, and tell us how that type of process works?
Well, in context with Trooper Proctor, when it mentions charges, we're not talking about criminal charges. We're talking about charges of violations against state police policies and procedures. So that although misconduct can lead to a lengthy suspension and or termination, we're not actually physically talking about where there's going to be another court action with jury assembled and a judge presiding over an actual case. This is an administrative process that is done internally, and we've talked on the channel before
Mhm.
about the lack of transparency of this process, how this is not in front of the public eye. This is certainly an administrative action done within the department.
Why is that not in front of the public? Is there any reason to that, or would the Mass State Police ever give a reason why it's not in front of the public?
It's again, it falls under somewhat of a human resources issue. There's union protections as well.
Mm,
Keep in mind that the union is not going to advocate for anything public against any member of the department. However, it doesn't. The lack of transparency does not mean that the outcomes will be insufficient. I can tell you that the Mass State Police on this is incredibly embarrassed, and it doesn't go well, especially when the governor of the state is weighing in on your conduct as well.
mm,
So, these are things that I can tell you, management, senior management at the top, they're not happy about this. This isn't something that they would protect. So they're going to go full bore during this trial board process and get to the bottom line.
mm. Good to know. So actually, Governor Healy would weigh in on this.
Oh, she's opined on this
Yeah.
during the trial. We were anticipating some very bad information that was going to come when Trooper Proctor took the stand, and then when
Mhm.
we heard how bad it was,
Yeah.
I remember a press conference, not a press conference, but I remember Governor Haley being interviewed, and she didn't have many words to say, but it was pretty clear that this was briefed. She was briefed on the scenario, on the situation at hand, and not at all happy. And, that led to, I would say, one of the factors of hiring a superintendent that came outside of the Massachusetts State Police. First time in the
Mm,
history of the state police, Colonel Noble coming from an outside agency.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I'll give my opinion of Maura Healey. I'm not really a particular fan of hers. I won't speak on your behalf, but I'm going to speak on my own. I'm not particularly impressed. It always seems to me that she comes out, makes these statements that she's not happy, and unfortunately, nothing gets done. I.e., Enrique Delgado-Garcia. We've heard her speak mostly about this, and that we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to find out. It's going to be transparency. And here we are, 126 days from his death, and still no answers. But I digress on that. We'll get to that in the second portion of the show. So then we have point number 2, composition of the trial board. The trial board is usually composed of senior officers within the department, such as a high-ranking members of the state police force, and occasionally may include an independent panel. That's very interesting. The board members will have been directly involved in the incident, beginning the investigation to ensure fairness. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, Todd?
Yeah, so the rank structure of the Mass State Police is as follows. Trainee, so anyone in the recruits in the academy, Enrique, trainee's actually considered a rank. And then once you graduate from the academy, you are now a trooper. And
Mm.
then the promotional process is sergeant, lieutenant, detective lieutenant, captain, detective captain, and then the superintendent will appoint majors and a deputy superintendent. So that's pretty much the rank structure as you climb the ladder. And so within the trial board, I believe is made up of captains or detective captains.
And then what would be something as like an independent panel? Is that like an outside company they would bring in to oversee this hearing, or have you ever heard anything like that?
I'm unfamiliar with an outside panel. My understanding is that it was always uniform rank. Now,
Okay.
there could be some anomalies based on misconduct where there's maybe other outside fact finders that need to be brought in, but I've never heard of an outside panel. Maybe that's just a placeholder in case there's a special circumstance
Got it.
where they need outside experience.
Okay. All right. So moving along, obviously we would have an opening statement. It's kind of like a trial. We're going into like a trial. So you'd have an opening statement. Both the officer face the charges of their representatives, such as a union lawyer or legal counsel, and the prosecution, often the department's internal affairs or appointed prosecutor, may present opening statements outlining their positions. Now, this doesn't take place in like it wouldn't be a court, right? Is it more just like a meeting room they have these in, or how does what does it usually look like, Todd?
Yeah, most likely Framingham, Massachusetts is general headquarters, and I'm confident that trial boards are all conducted there. Some of the trial board members will probably be working out of headquarters, and so they'll basically assemble there. Also, keep in mind that I'll give you a real good example. The CDL scandal with the
Hmm.
licensing.
Yes.
There were 4 members of the department that were charged. Um, One of the members received more gratuities than the others. And so when you hear things like representation from either an attorney or union representation, um, that's where if I'm caught up in something, but I had a lesser role, I'm 100% going to advocate for myself to be able to not justify my behavior, but I don't want to get caught up with someone else's, greedy actions and get
Hmm.
pulled into their story. I'm going to stand up on my own accountability, however good or bad it is, but I don't want to be identified as, receiving the same or being accused of the same misconduct of someone else that had a greater issue. In this particular case, Trooper Proctor testified on stand to in a court of law of all this misconduct. We saw his supervisors that were also involved in this, but obviously they got a lesser disciplinary action against them.
Which is kind of frightening, I would seem. Like, that's your higher above, that's your supervisor, and they're essentially enabling that bad behavior with partaking in this, in these nasty text messages and God knows what else. And I always say this too is, I look at this situation and I make this very clear with my, my audience, and to put this out there, that this is behavior that just doesn't happen in a simple case. This is behavior that according, with Proctor and Tully and Buchanan, more right now, what I see in Proctor is that this is behavior that started a long time ago, and maybe earlier in his life, and this carried over into his professional career. And the crazy thing to think about it is, I'm sure you have to go through a very thorough psych exam to get into the Mass State Police, as most likely you have to do in the military or any other organization where you're going to hold a badge and a gun and protect and serve either the citizens in and around your area or your country. I just, it's pretty sick that he was able to really dupe people and trick people past that. And then you have to start looking like, okay, well, if he was doing this in the Karen Reed case, what other cases was he doing this in? What other conversations was he having with his sister or his superiors or friends or family members? I mean, it's pretty haunting.
Well, you have an aspect here where he's working on extremely high profile cases. But before any of these high profile cases, before there was anyone charged with a crime, the media attention that surrounds this stuff, and you're the guy behind the scenes that's collecting evidence, and you're seeing and have control of all this data and information and evidence that's being discovered, submitted. It's going to trial. And then you've got your friends on the outside that know that you're the guy involved in these. He got out over his skis. He got really cocky, and you just tell the tone in the text messaging between his friends. And then as far as his superiors go, I'm sure they didn't understand any type of communications, and I'm not giving anyone a pass, but things are done in a silo. And the conversation with his sister, the conversations with his friends, although similar to his superiors, were done in a silo and had a different bravado, if you will, in arrogance, to be quite frank, in those communications. And it all caught up to him. It all literally caught up to him.
Yeah, I think it gets to the point where, some people in law enforcement, after a certain time and their reputation they build, they almost feel like they're invincible, and I can pretty much do anything and get away with it. And that's when they become scary. That's the scary guys. I mean, there was a guy just recently down in New Jersey, a sheriff that just actually went to prison, I believe, that was scamming the town and the townspeople of like millions of dollars, and actually started to get his family involved in it. And I think his name was James Burke, maybe, or some sheriff. And I don't know if you heard about it, but it's like they get this attitude about him about like, yeah, I'm kind of the guy that runs the town, and gets in with the locals and starts finding loopholes, how to push things around, and that's how we get things like this. How we get people like Trooper Proctor. Okay, let me get into the presentation of evidence. The prosecution presents the evidence supporting the charges, which could include witness testimony, reports, audio, video recordings, and other relevant documentation. The officer and the defense team allowed to cross-examine witnesses and challenge evidence presented. So I'm pretty sure that the tapes of the Karen Reed trial were probably entered into this hearing, if not maybe transcripts or anything like that. Probably the text messages. It probably pretty much just handed the Karen Reed file and said, "Here you go." And that's probably the evidence that was brought into this. So it also says the defense team is allowed to cross-examine witnesses and challenge evidence as well. I wonder what kind of witnesses he would bring in if he had any witnesses. I don't think he'd be using his superiors as they were
Right.
involved in it. But what would be a type of process like that, Todd?
Well, I'm going to add to the list.
Sure.
You had that federal investigation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You had the federal investigation that really exposed the text messages, and that was just a piece what we got to see during the trial. But there's probably a treasure trove of information that the feds, again, they come in deep and they come in thorough, and they've got the capability to go through and utilize those resources for digital forensics. So there was nothing that could be hidden within within those communications. And I'm even going to go as far as to mention Brian Higgins here, in this part of the conversation,
Yeah.
because those communications were talked about inside, by Attorney Jackson during the trial.
Mhm.
So what did that information glean? The other, drinking off duty and driving, in your unmarked vehicle.
Yes.
The Canton police officer that lost his gun and his badge temporarily. All those different things are so damning. So who do you call for a witness? I think he's standing alone on this. I don't know who he could bring in to advocate on his behalf.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to be bringing in someone and talking about his character at this point. I think it's going to be really hard to find a character witness. All right, so we have the presentation of evidence. Then the defense is going to get their turn to present. The officer can present their side of the story, call witnesses, which we don't think is going to happen, and provide evidence that may refute or explain the allegations. The defense has the right to present argument that casts doubt on the charges. So I'm sure that his union representative or his lawyer is going to obviously try the hardest here. It's weird. I think the defense, I really do think the defense, and we heard this during the trial, that, hey, I was under a lot of pressure and I was, I'm on this high profile case. And it's like, wait a minute, sir. You're trained for these specific incidences. You can't let things rattle you, sir. You went through the Mass State Police Academy. You went through your psych your examinations, your training. You are what? He was 10, I think 10 years. I think his career started 10 years ago. You've been in this, and I may be wrong on that. I think it was 10 or 15 years. You've been in this for 10 years, and you're going to say now this is what's going to rattle you? It just didn't make sense to me, Todd. What would you think if he posed that type of defense?
Not going to fly. Holds no water at all. And again, when we talk about all the different circumstances that this case has brought out, if there is an accusation of misconduct and the internal affairs go out, they do their fact-finding mission, they present evidence and information corroborating the misconduct. There's still that piece where the trooper in question still has their say. They haven't given any type of statements for or against the misconduct. In
Mm,
this case, practice before judge and jury under oath.
yeah.
Different circumstance here. How, how do you say I didn't do it?
Yeah, it's there.
The only
It's
apology, well, there was no real apology, but other than, that was not my best self, or, however he framed his words in a haphazard apology, he implicated himself.
Yeah, and Jackson gave him the opportunity. Said, "Do you want to apologize to Miss Reed right now?" And I think that's, going back to what you just said. Oh, it was just not in my best frame of mind or my best judgment at that time. So it really wasn't an apology. It really
No,
wasn't an apology.
no,
All right,
not
so
at
we
all.
go into closing statements. After all the evidence is presented, both the prosecution and defense will make closing arguments. So it's much like a trial. This is where each side summarizes their case and argues why the board should rule in their favor. And we go to the board deliberation. After the hearing, the trial board deliberates in private to consider the evidence to determine whether the officer is guilty or not guilty of the charges. They also discuss the appropriate disciplinary action if applicable. Todd, I'm not really sure if you're familiar, but how long does usually this deliberation process last? Could it be, an hour? Could it be days? Or is there a set amount of time on this?
Couldn't speak to the time, but typically it's the same day as the actual hearing. So
Mm.
again,
Oh,
this
wow.
is such a unique case to have that second date in place. Was based on all the moving parts, based on this hearing, this child board duty status hearing.
Hmm. So then we have the decision. Trial board renders a decision, which could range from dismissal of charges, a reprimand, a suspension, demotion, or even termination, depending on the severity of the violation. Um, I I don't know. I have a hard one. I have a hard time with this one. I still think I still think this is going to get dragged out. I don't see this in any. It's just my opinion, and I may be wrong. And everybody comes back to me and says, "You were so wrong." It was in February, but I just don't see in February they make this decision. I think they continue to try to drag this out as long as possible. Um, who knows? Who knows?
Well, I'll say this, that despite how people feel about Michael Proctor, he is still owed due process. So, he's in a limbo state right now. He's considered an employee of the Commonwealth. However, he's not receiving compensation. He was ordered to turn in his department issued weapon, uniforms, all gear, his cruiser. So either way, there's going to have to be a decision for him to move on with his life. And
Hmm,
so to prolong something like this actually doesn't lend itself to due process.
hmm.
So I was anticipating that we were going to hear something yesterday, but given the February date, I anticipate that. Again, I want to bring everyone's attention to the fact that the Municipal Police Training Council is the certifying body for police officers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So there may be a time where their input in their final decision making is also part of this process.
So Debbie's asking the question: Who would present the evidence against Proctor? That's a good question.
Yeah, the internal affairs would have done all of that due diligence. They would have captured any video. You can go to YouTube and put in Canton Confidential and get a treasure trove of all that different coverage. But that video evidence that was well documented during the trial, that's just one layer of it. Then the text messages, the communications. There's stuff that really wasn't covered as far as a proper investigation. Uh, Brian, we talked about this. How many key players inside the house weren't interviewed in a
Yeah.
timely manner, right? So that's a violation of department rules and regulations and not following investigative procedures. So there's just a number of things that are going to be presented against him that are very, very damning.
Mm. Yeah, and I think, obviously, I mean, duh, I think he gets fired before Karen Reed 2.0. This is a huge win for the defense team. I mean, they may be able to bring this in and say, look, your star investigator here with the Mass State Police not only said all these disparaging things about Karen Reed, didn't follow procedure when investigating this case, could have possibly helped plant evidence. And here we go. This guy's fired now. I mean, that's a huge win for the Karen Reed defense, which is, it's great. I think it's great. But also, I'm always curious now. Are they going to be allowed? Is the judge going to allow that to come into trial the second time around? As we see that she she always tries to block everything. But I think that if it's out there and it's public, I think it's hard to not be able to bring this into the trial if we have a second one.
Brian, go back to your point about planting evidence. I'm confident that the internal affairs will thoroughly they're as fact finders, they would have interviewed police officers at Canton that responded from Canton PD that responded to the house on Fairview that morning, early morning. They there's more than what we would consider some of the damning evidence that was recorded, publicly recorded at the trial. There's a whole process that would be examined by the internal affairs about, was this investigation actually done on the up and up? Was there bias? Right, that's another violation of department rules and regs of bias
Wow.
policing. So it just, there's so much more than what people might be thinking about.
So this could be a huge win for Karen Reed at the end of this. Huge
And
win
and if
is
the
what you're saying.
prosecution doesn't call him, 1,000%
The defense is
sure
going to call him.
the defense is gonna call, and they're
Yeah.
gonna call Mr. Proctor to the
Yeah.
stand, not Trooper Proctor.
Not Trooper Proctor. Wow. Just going to get this in. We have a question from Knowing Your Bits from Your Bites. I love that. $10 says, how is not recording any conversation with witnesses considered standard operating procedure? Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Todd, for your great insight. If you want to answer that, Todd.
Sure. I know that when I was in the fire marshal's office and we interviewed witnesses, we actually took written statements. We actually didn't record anyone that we interviewed. So the process was, I would sit down with you, Brian. Brian, tell me about what transpired. We're here for this incident. Tell me your involvement. How much do you know about this? And I would take your written statement, and then I would ask you to read the written statement that I physically wrote, and then I would ask you to, if there was anything I got wrong, put a single line through it. Don't scribble it out. Put a single line through it, and then initial it, and then we can go further down in the paper and make a correction on the error.
Mm.
So it was done very methodically and very transparently, even if there was some type of an error or mistake, or maybe I processed the way the person explained their version of the story. So it was a very methodical process, but it was always a written statement as opposed to something that was a recording.
Mhm. And then finally, we have an appeals process. Depending on the department's policy and nature of the case, the officer may have the right to appeal the decision to a higher authority, such as a civilian review board, or in some cases, the courts. State police trial board hearings are part of the internal disciplinary procedure designed to maintain professionalism and accountability within the law enforcement agencies. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the law here, but would Proctor, if he's found obviously guilty of this, and they say, "Hey, here's your discipline," would he have the ability to appeal it here in the state of Massachusetts?
So I would say yes, there would be an appeal process. However, the decision, if the decision is termination, that will stand. And
Mhm.
let's just say some hypothetical scenario that he won his appeal, then there would be some type of a back pay settlement, for the period of time from termination to the change in decision. I don't see that happening, but that's just a hypothetical scenario.
You know,
Also, Brian,
I'm sorry.
I want to address something that has come up a lot of time in your threads during your lives, and in regarding Trooper Proctor retiring and being terminated, but living off of his pension.
Mm,
Um, Here's the fact: there is no pension that a state trooper gets unless they've hit their 20-year mark. Nothing. There's no lesser number. There's no percentage. Every Mass State Trooper must serve 20 years before they're eligible for their retirement. So
mhm,
Proctor will have nothing of compensation from the Commonwealth in the
mm.
event that he's terminated.
Good to know. Now, I was just thinking too, he gets found guilty on this board hearing. I'm sure that sets up a very nice civil case for Karen Reed against Trooper Proctor, or just Michael Proctor at that point.
It would be Reed versus Proctor, and I would imagine it would be a civil rights violation,
Yeah.
civil rights lawsuit. Um, um,
Um,
it would be violation of, I think, Fourth Amendment due process.
hmm.
or Fifth Amendment. Yeah, fourth or fifth.
So you're thinking on in February we're going to get some type of decision, if
Yes.
in your expert opinion.
Yes. I just don't see where these types of situations are prolonged. It's and again, despite what people think about Michael Proctor, it it there's he's due process, and that basically means a timely and fair hearing.
Hmm. So I have a question here from the audience. Can you work elsewhere while suspended?
Not for another police department.
And then if this ultimately sinks him, he can't apply anywhere else, correct? He'll be out of law enforcement altogether.
And that's the connection to the Municipal Police Training Council that does the certification. Brian, I misspoke earlier. It's the 14th Amendment for due process.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I'm sorry. And then to clarify, if he's found here guilty of this board, fired by the Mass State Police, he can never become a state police or local police officer anywhere, correct?
Anywhere, period.
Yeah.
Regardless of state.
Okay. All right, let's do this. Let's go through. Obviously, you and I have talked extensively about Trooper Enrique Delgado-Garcia. We had a long conversation. Oh God, probably 3 hours the other night when we went out and sat down. I just want to refresh the audience a little bit with some bullet points here, and then Todd and I will opine on this a little bit. As you know, so I look deeper into this. It's still truly troubling. I mean, we're about 126 days past the initial injury or attack, if you want to call that. So this happened back on September 12th. Delgado-Garcia was transferred to UMass Worcester, where he succumbed to his injuries on the 13th. The family reported a broken neck, broken teeth, and brain injury. I've seen the photos of his injuries. It's photos that I never want to see again. Only at a trial, if we have people on trial for what happened to him. And they're pretty awful. I mean, the man looked like he was in a fight, like he was in a beating. And that's just my interpretation of the photos. So then on September 16th, Delgado-Garcia's family is asked, and this is new. I just got this recently. The family allowed me to this answer. So they were asked to go on the 16th, where they met with two state police officers in suits in Worcester, Massachusetts. There was an office there that they met at that was an investigative office, and they were shown a security video. And this actually clears up, because I think there was a lot of speculation in your conversations when we talked about this, if it was either a cell phone video or a security video. And they've revealed to me that it was a security video. So what was on the video has still not been told to me, and I don't think it ever will until the conclusion of this, unless it gets leaked by someone, until the conclusion of this investigation. And they stated that they weren't there no longer than 20 minutes during the viewing. Now, this is where I got to come back to you and ask you, where would these security cameras be throughout the academy? Or were there any there when you were there?
There would be a single camera, maybe two cameras that inside of the gymnasium. There's an elevated area, 3-4 steps from the main gym, that is called the fitness area. That's where all your gym equipment is. And then there's a larger, I believe it's 2 courts, that you would consider a basketball dimensions for a basketball court. And that's where we used to set up the boxing exercise. As I mentioned on your previous channel, but as a reminder to your audience, we did not have a ring. The boxing exercises were conducted on a wrestling match, a wrestling mat, an oversized wrestling mat. It was so large, it would take a good 8 to 10 people to actually roll this thing out. And at the end of the training day, it would take the same 8 or 10 people to roll it back up and then slide it out of the way. So it was thick. It was about 2 inches thick. So it served the purposes. From my leaving the academy, they did at one time have a physical boxing ring. The decision was then, if we're conducting training consistent with boxing, then we're training boxing. Then we're teaching them to box.
Right.
So that wasn't the objective. So they since removed, and I got this from the person that replaced me as the defensive tactics coordinator. They actually got rid of the boxing ring, and I believe it went back to the exercises on the mat. So that's kind of the evolution of the program as to where it is today. To answer your question regarding the cameras, probably 1 or 2 cameras elevated, fixed over any activity, any areas of activity from the fitness down on the main floor where the basketball spaces, where the boxing exercises would be conducted. So you're probably looking at an aerial view.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. From what I'm getting, security video. Like I have a security camera right here. It's an overview camera of the room.
Yeah.
I have it rolling if I ever have a guest in here, just in case something happened or whatever.
Yeah,
And it runs
absolutely.
24 hours a day as well too. So
Yeah.
break-ins or whatever. And I just want to get to this really quick. Dewey loves duckies. Thanks for the $5. Said, is there any, and this is probably going back to Proctor, is there any case where it would be proper to interview witnesses or potential suspects in front of or with each other?
Inappropriate. Always separate. Always investigator and the witness. You just don't know at the early onset of an investigation. You don't know whose role in a crime and what their involvement is. And so if you have someone that's got a strong personality and there's an eyewitness, they're absolutely going to intimidate that other person to make sure they don't give all the details. So never ever do you have more than the single person you're interviewing mixed in with someone else. Never ever. Even if only one person is going to be interviewed in some weird random way, and you have a bystander, maybe someone came to the residence that heard a concern and just wanted to show up for, they are isolated away from that witness until you get their statement, and then they're released from the interview.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because while I was down sick, I was watching a lot of those 48-hour specials, and I came across one yesterday where there was a girlfriend, a boyfriend, and a friend that were out at a bar. They were drinking, and they went back to her boyfriend's place, and they had been heavily drinking. And the friend ends up dead in the apartment, and you have the boyfriend and girlfriend that are there. Police come in, they call 911, police come in, this guy's dead on the floor, and they're saying what happened, and neither one of them going, I don't know. So what they did was, like you said, separated them, had conversations with both of them, but in this very rare instance, to see if they could get a reaction, they brought both of them together because they wanted to see what they would say. So again, it's going back, separate your subjects, listen to the individual stories. If you're not getting somewhere with that normal, it's abnormal, they said in this the special, that they would bring two people together, but sometimes you can get, maybe a reaction if none of them are opening up about what happened.
Yeah, and that's the investigators really, following the ebb and flow, and really a lot of it's just a gut instinct that you're going to try something, see if you can get a reaction. But when you watch 48 Hours or Dateline and all those true crime stories, that's a very good depiction as to how interviews are conducted. One or two investigators, the witness that they're interviewing, but oftentimes, all the time, they're by themselves.
All right, so let's go back to this. So we have so the 16th they viewed the video. And then we had a lot of things that came out on the 18th. We heard of Giovanna Baptiste in a couple of reports that he put out there. It says he reported during his time at the academy some hazing, some racial incidents, and while he was at the academy that he attended, and he was part of the same class as Delgado-Garcia, and then ultimately I think was let go just weeks prior to the prior to the Delgado-Garcia incident. And he did, quite a few reports. Then we had on September 23rd, Attorney General Andrea Campbell, and this is what's kind of sparks my interest in all this. Appoints defense attorney David Meyer as a special investigator. And quote, she says, today I'm appointing attorney David Meyer to lead the investigation. Mr. Meyer has a deep deep experience in death investigations and will ensure independence and integrity in this matter. Now I go back, Todd, and I look at this and I said, and we talked about this at dinner, if this was so cut and dry and they knew what happened, or you know, it was this boxing training exercise, a medical incident during this boxing training exercise was the statement from the spokesperson. We don't know who the spokesperson is, but that's what's put out there. If it was so cut and dry, then why 10 days later you're putting on a special investigator and they're calling it a matter? To me, you're calling it a matter. To me, just in my opinion, seems like there's a little bit more there than just a boxing training exercise and a medical incident. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's a part of where the investigation will determine what level of involvement others had in Enrique's death. If it was, and again, I'm going to play out the scenario as we know it to be. It's a boxing exercise. Then the video is great corroborating evidence. The injuries that are obviously on his body that are inconsistent with boxing. And I always say this, you've heard me say this in other matters. Wait for the medical evidence. The medical evidence has the unbiased, independent story of how a person was injured and how the injuries were sustained. So, you know, therein lies the additional part of the investigation. Also keep in mind that Attorney Meyer isn't doing this investigation independently, meaning by himself. He's got a team, and his team of experts most likely should have probably someone that has a background with medical examiner history, so that they can expertly state that these injuries are or are not consistent with boxing.
Yeah,
right?
and
So
go ahead. Go ahead, Todd. I'm sorry.
no, you're fine. I was just going to say that it's not a matter of just putting out, investigators in the field in lining up a bunch of witnesses. You want experts on. He wants experts on his team to be able to speak to things specifically, and then from here, all of that. Again, I use the term all the time. Fact finding. All of that information then is going to be generated into a report. This report's going to be lengthy report with eyewitness accounts, witness statements, the investigation itself, the interview around the medical examiner. I wish the family had an independent medical examiner, but it is what it is at this point. But again, we'll see down the line what will happen once the investigation's done.
Yeah, and I even went to the lengths of, going to public records. I just wanted to see what was written on Enrique Delgado-Garcia's death certificate, and it is pending. And I thought it was very interesting. On the death certificate, it said cause of injury. It said no, and I found that to be very interesting. And I'm not sure if, I'm not an expert in death certificates, if that ever changes or because it's pending. I'd be curious to see what ultimately is going to happen there. But, I always thought that after 90 days, and we're at about 126 right now, and I'm not counting, we're at 126 days. I thought at 90 days we would have a medical examiner's report here, but it's not looking like it. And I'm just like, why is this taking so long? I mean, if this is put out there, this is a boxing training exercise and you had a medical incident, then why is it taking so long? And that's why I want to keep trying to educate the audience here. And listen, I have a lot of people that have many, many different opinions on what happened here. It was just simple. There was a head injury, a pre-existing condition, whatever it may be. I've cleared that with the family. Enrique had no pre-existing conditions going into the academy. He did not have a head injury. He had nothing wrong with his brain. He was an avid runner. He worked out, passed his physical examinations, his psych examinations to get into the academy. And I've run this by Todd as well too, and maybe Todd can opine on this a little bit, that if you have any prior medical conditions, those have to be cleared by, your medical doctor or physician to be able to enter the academy. If you can talk a little bit about that, Todd.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. That there's a lot there to respond to, Brian. You know, this investigation could be determining that it isn't cut and dry,
Hmm.
and that the length of time is there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
Don't know what it is yet, but I'm confident that Attorney Meyer and his team are lifting every rock and examining what's underneath every rock. As
Yeah.
far as I'll give you an example, we would have candidates come in as recruits that were over the age limit, and they would have to appeal.
Excuse me.
And typically they would win their appeal. They would enter into the academy. They'd go through it just like all the other younger recruits, and have a great career. But there was also part of that medical uh, um, declaration that you're fit to be. I remember the oldest recruit that went through the academy when I was on staff was 41 years of age. He did fine, no
God
issues.
bless him.
Yeah, right. Not easy. Not 21, 41.
Not at
You know,
41. It's not
so
easy.
yeah. And then I'm gonna add another layer to this. Once you are in the academy, and I share this, Brian, at dinner, that the medical unit also has to clear you to be fit to participate in the boxing exercises. So that's just an internal. Again, I said to you that we put controls in place. Having the medical unit physically present during each and every match, and also the approval that everyone is fit and able to be a part of the exercise.
Yeah, and you also said that if you had any type of boxing training, you were not
Correct.
able to partake in those exercises. All right, let's bring up this presentation again, and we'll get through the rest of it here. So, so we go to October 4th, and this was the first public statement by family attorney Michael Wilcox. He says, quote, "I don't understand what this training was intended to do," said Michael Wilcox, an attorney for the family, calling the model a little outdated and it's a bit dangerous. Are they trying to raise shepherds or warriors? He said. They are risking men's lives, and to what end? And then also in that same article, and again, I have a Google Sheets, a running kind of timeline of this. You can find it on my Facebook page or on my Twitter account at LTL Media, and you can just find it. It's pinned right to the top of either platform. So if you want to kind of keep referencing back, and I have some great articles that kind of sourced all this information along with the family, if you want to follow along with this case, and I'll keep that as a rolling document. But also in that article, it said in some of the articles, in the same article, friends and family had said he, as in Enrique, for weeks described a hazing-like and torturous environment at the academy. So I look at this and I start to kind of add some of this stuff up. You have John Baptiste that comes out on the 16th. It seems like Delgado-Garcia was talking about the same hazing incidences as well. And, maybe on this tape, we have this public comment now that there was a boxing match on the security tape, either a fight or this boxing match, because the attorney's saying, I don't understand what this training is intended to do. Was this a multiple one-on-one, or was a instructor allowing this to go a lot longer, or was this maybe not in the gym? Could this been in another area where there was a security overhead camera? And they said that this was a training incident. Maybe trying to make it look like a defensive tactic. In a hallway, you had to fight your way out of a scenario. that's the the 101 question on this is what's on that tape. So I just keep looking at this and just saying, and this is what I try to convey to the audience, that it's not adding up to me. The length of time here. If this was just so simple, then why not have an answer, sooner than later?
Yeah, and Brian, I've shared with you that myself, I have more questions than answers. From first-hand experience, when I was running the program, I would envision on that tape should show a match with one recruit
Mm.
that has been matched up with Enrique, and that there was a punch, a jab, or something that injured Enrique and he went down. Now, that doesn't explain the other injuries. But
Is-
if they're pointing to a tape that exists, then it should be consistent with a boxing match with a
Mm.
two individuals that are matched up against each other. Anything beyond that that is not on that film in other injuries that cannot be accounted for, there's a problem. There's a
Mhm.
huge problem. And that, again, I go back to my earlier statement, could be the reason why this is not a cut and dry, where 120 plus days and counting for this investigation. So there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what happened prior to the portion of tape that, I mean, it could just, again, it could, the family was only there 20 minutes when they viewed this video. They said they were in the office no longer than 20 minutes. So I'm guessing this video probably could have been 8 to 10 minutes, a little bit of discussion, and then they're on their way. So it wasn't like they sat there for 2 hours and watched 2 hours security video. So my question would be, if it's just a portion of tape, well, what the hell happened before that? And then what the hell happened after that? And again, just to what you said, this might not be so cut and dry. There could be a lot more things obviously going on. And then let's go back to the last piece of information here that I just got recently that the family allowed me to talk about. So they said on December 30th, the family finally speaks with David Meyer for the first time regarding the investigation. He said he interviewed friends and family to get a feel for Enrique was. After conducting numerous interviews with friends and family, David tells the family that he's now shifting his focus back to his internal investigation of the academy, specifically examining the higher authorities responsible for its programs, training, and oversight. Todd, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can tell you that if there were any injuries from my part of the program, which was defensive tactics, we always lobbied for more training as a unit. So we would go anywhere between 60 to 75 hours, depending on what the curriculum developers would allow us to train the recruits in. Of that, we allocated 8 to 12 hours of training for the boxing exercises. So if there was any type of an injury, whether it was baton training or pepper spray training, I was required to write a report. So any injuries to any recruits was, if I didn't write a report, it would be caught at medical, and then medical's report is going to say, "Hey, McGhee, what's going on in defensive tactics?" So you always were forth with it, with writing your report, submitting it, to my supervisor, and that was just kind of standard protocol. And then, of course, if medical was involved for an evaluation or an extended care, then so be it. That's kind of the way we handle things. So all of that was in the spirit of transparency, report writing, and disclosure of incidents.
Why do you think Maya would investigate Enrique's friends and family to kind of get a sense of who he was? What? Why would they need that information?
Yeah, I think that's important. In the event that there was any disparaging information that was stated by anyone within, I'm speculating here, but
Sure.
to answer your question you asked, he would want to establish Enrique's personality, his demeanor, from other people disassociated with the academy, disassociated with the state police.
Mhm.
And so now you're looking at credibility of the witnesses that were interviewed. So here I've got one person saying negative, bad things about him connected with the academy, but yet friends and family say that he walks on water. So that's really an important piece to establish credibility of the witnesses. And if you can remember from DA Early's press conference, which we both feel was inappropriate on behalf of the family, they raved about him. DA Early raved about how well liked Enrique was, how a great worker he was, how committed to his job he was. So that should be consistent across the board.
Yeah.
And even as a recruit that's just saying, uh, sir, no, sir, or ma'am, no, ma'am, 16 hours out of the training day, you get a feel for people's personalities after being around them for so much time. So I really think that was prudent for him to really try and get that independent assessment from friends and family.
Yeah. This is it's one that just keeps puzzling me. And like you said, I think with you, I have a lot more questions than answers during this. And I only hope that we get truth and transparency in this. And I have some worry as well. I think it's been reported that David Meyer's investigation contract for this case ends in is either June or July. And I just hope we don't get to a point where he concludes his report and says, yeah, didn't really find much here. And they try to pass a check across to the family and say, well, hopefully this can make things better, because this really is going to set the stage for the future of the Mass State Police. And it's scary, because to me, that when I look at this, Todd, and we talked about this at dinner, the thing that scares me about this is, one, there are troopers that are now graduated and are serving our community that most likely know something about this. And again, I'm only speculating, or could be involved in this. And then I also look at two, and pretty much the same thing, that there are instructors or hired authorities that are at that academy that are there to protect recruits when they come in and train them the proper way to put them out into our community to serve and protect, that one may be involved in this, or two, knew what happened and they're not speaking as well. And again, I'm only speculating here, but it's scary. And I don't want to see this happen to another trooper ever again. And I'm sure you don't either. I'm
Right.
sure you don't either. And it really worries me. And I hope that there is some answer in this case, because that young man deserves justice. He doesn't deserve, what he's getting here. And I'm really counting. I'm really counting on David Meyer to come through here. Your thoughts, Todd?
Yeah, Brian, I really don't see passing a check to the family that this is going to make it all go away. The family wants justice for Enrique, and the attorney is has been hired. We may not agree with the attorney's process and what's been done, but that attorney is also waiting for Attorney Myers. The family attorney Wilcox is also waiting for Attorney Myers' final report. And to think that the family would just kind of shrug their shoulders, accept a check, and accept that this will all go away. I just My family wouldn't do it. If I was a recruit with a great desire to have a law enforcement career, and something bad happened, and there was potential allegations of gross negligence and misconduct, they're not going to take a check. So I I'm confident that the investigation is going to be thorough. It's going to present itself. And the other thing to say, that nothing to see here, well, then why did it take you 100 and X amount of days, for you to say nothing here to see? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of things here that um, I honestly feel are going to lend to a investigation that has integrity behind it.
Yeah, and I just make this clear too. I wasn't saying that the family would take and accept a check. I was just saying I hope in this case that a check doesn't get tried to get slipped to them and say, hey, let's just make this go away. So I want to make that very clear. I'm not saying that the Delgado-Garcia family would ever do that. And again, I agree with you. If it was my son, hell no, there's no amount of money. I want this out in the public. So let's just say this investigate concludes and we find out that something nefarious happens. What, in your opinion, here now starts with the Mass State? I mean, this would be a huge stain. It would be a huge stain, and how how do they clean this up? I mean, let's say over the last 5 years, there really hasn't been a good track record here. Now, how do they rebuild and retool this? I mean, did they just come in and squash this whole thing out and start over, or where do they go from here?
You can't throw it away. One, too high pro, like Karen Reed's trial, too high profile of a matter. Then now this will trigger internal affairs. There's a lot of things on hold right now because of Attorney Meyer's investigation. So if there was an internal affairs investigation, it's most likely on hold, and until the report comes out. And then you have the same process all over. If gross negligence has been identified and there have been names that have been implicated as to wrongdoing, it's going to be Proctor 2.0 with different players. So any attempt at cover-ups, any misreporting, all violations of policy and procedure, they can't brush this under the rug and make it go away.
So what do they do in the future here if this this does happen? Let's just say in this case that something nefarious does happen. Do they retool their training, their psych? I mean, how do we stop this from not happening again? Is this a whole program shakedown, a whole readjustment of the entry program into the state police? I mean, how do they fix this?
Well, first and foremost, boxing goes away, right? So that's never going to be a component of defensive tactics. And then the nuclear option is that the state police no longer train their own, and that the Municipal Police Training Council now becomes the de facto training organization for all police officers, regardless of agency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I don't know, Todd. I just hope we get to some answers here pretty soon. I just want to direct everybody to a website that I've created, and obviously everybody knows about the billboard that I've taken out in front of Gillette Stadium. The second one is currently running. It's on the southbound side. It will be there until February 6th. And essentially when you drive by, it will have this banner minus the QR code because they wouldn't allow me to do that because they say that it's too distracting for drivers and it actually causes accidents in their policies. So that's fine. So this website is justiceforenrique.com. You can go there. The QR code goes directly to the family's GoFundMe account. I do want to start doing some fundraisers to get them to their goal. They're about 47,000. They're looking to get at 60,000 of their goal. So if you do feel that you can donate, please scan the QR code, or at the top of the chat, I do have their GoFundMe linked to the top. You can do there. Gives you a brief rundown of what happened to Trooper Enrique Delgado-Garcia. We have a countdown, a running countdown as well. And if you want, you can reach out here and demand answers. There are a couple of contacts. You can click on these photos and get to the appropriate higher authorities in this case, and maybe start getting some emails to them or phone calls and asking them about some updates here. The real sad thing about this, Todd, and we'll end with this and your thoughts on this. And we talked about this at dinner. The thing that's been, really, I think a pretty letdown for me, and I think the community as well, is, as we just saw on that counter, 126 days. We know the community outcry. We've had the story. You've spoken many times to the news media. We just had, I had WBZ in here a couple weeks ago that talked about the billboard. You would think, our governor's watching, our attorney general's watching, David Myers watching, the Mass State Police is watching, that there would be maybe some public statement. Hey, we understand the major concern of what happened to Enrique Delgado-Garcia, and we're actively still investigating that case. It'd be nice to hear a public update, and we haven't heard anything, and it's just pretty sad. And every time I do have the opportunity to talk to the family, they don't really hear much either. And I don't know. It just would be nice to hear something from our public officials. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I knowing how these things go, it when you have a public press conference, you have your media there, and so you're going to have a press conference, and you're not going to be, because of the investigation, you're not going to be able to speak to anything, and so the optics of that from a political side of things, do we just let this thing play out, or do we go before the general public with no answers? The latter is not good for optics. So let it play out. That's the decision by our political leaders, whether they're at the state house or within the Mass State Police, and the report will do the speaking, and they'll have an unlimited amount of questions to answer once that report has been completed by Attorney Meyer.
We just need that report, Todd. We need
Yeah.
that report. Before I let you go, I just want to make sure, and I've seen this come up in the chat a couple of times about a language barrier. There is not a language barrier. I talk with an English speaking member of their family, so I want to disparage that rumor. Okay, so that's out. Let's just put that out there. I also want to disparage the rumor about the pre-existing medical conditions. That's out too. So I really want to just lead people, and this is just from my opinion, my view, because I think I've talked most about this case, is that it's pretty simple logic to what's going on here. And I think the roots are a lot deeper than what's being said. And we have to now look at the length of the investigation. And Todd and I talked about this at the very beginning, if you're just jumping in, that if this was so cut and dry, we probably would have had an answer in a couple of weeks. And here we are now, 126 days. So there's a lot more roots to what's going on here. And hopefully we get some answers soon. But you know me, I'm going to keep rattling the cage, doing everything that I can to keep this case current. I don't want it to disappear. And I literally tweet at the Mass State Police every day. I'm sure they know who I am. I'm always tagging them in posts, and I will let them know that this person here will not let this go until we have a conclusion. But Todd, I just want to say this. Thank you so much for your time, your truth, your transparency. You are, and I've said this to your face, you're one of the good guys. And I do believe that there are many, many good law enforcement. I see it all over the internet every day, the stories that I see that are out there serving our communities. I just want things here in Massachusetts to get cleaned up, and I'm sure you do as well. We can't have cases like this anymore. We can't have cases like Karen Reed, Sandra Birchmore, Trooper Enrique Delgado-Garcia, and all of the other cases that we cover here. Any final thought before you go, Todd?
Yeah, Brian, thank you again for having me on. There's a lot to talk about with not just the State Police Academy and Enrique's situation, but so much going on with police misconduct, and it's got to be called out. And I wrote a LinkedIn article in regards to police misconduct. There was a state trooper that was relieved of duty for stealing golf balls out of a Target in Central Mass in Worcester area. And I put in the article that no good cop wants to work with a dirty cop. And if anyone reading this is up to shenanigans and misconduct, quit now and stop ruining the good name of the men and women that proudly wear the uniforms for their department and proudly serve their communities. Quit now.
Yeah, I agree, Todd. Thank you, my friend. And I call you my friend because we are friends and we've built that relationship over this past year. You've been a tremendous asset to this channel, to this community, and for keeping things straight. And I really appreciate you, and I appreciate your time. And I look forward to doing another one of these again soon.
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much for those kind words. Thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor. And let's just keep speaking truth to power, and let's just set the record when things rabbit trails of some of the rumor mill that's out there. They're rampant, and that's another thing that I appreciate about your channel, that you level set everybody. Anyone that's willing to tune into your channel, we do our best to bring accurate information and not provocative clickbait type stuff. So always willing to support you in that.
You know me, if I ever have a Mass State Police question, I always run it by you first. Hey, Todd, can you clear this up? Or, hey, Todd, what do you think about this? The text message usually comes through, and I'm glad that we have that relationship, and I appreciate, again, all of your insight, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Todd, take care. All right, everybody, that was Todd McGhee. I also want to bring some attention to this as well. On Sunday, there was a national standout for Karen Reed, and you can go to Karen Reed. I just want to make sure I get the web address right. Karen Reed. Actually, I'll just bring this up. KarenReedStandouts.com, and I'll bring the website out. If you don't know, and you can go on the national standout list here, and it has all of the standouts that will happen on Sunday, this Sunday, the 19th, and we'll be standing out across the nation to free Karen Reed. And again, I want to thank Todd McGhee for his time. I want to thank all of you for your time here, and I hope you found this live to be very valuable. I really value Todd's insight and his truth in all of these matters. So that's going to conclude tonight's live. I appreciate everybody here that popped in. And I just want to get this up really quick because I didn't see it. But Sophie, thank you for being a channel moderator and a 4-month Go Squad member. Said, I'm happy to be here and I love both of you guys. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe on the way out. And I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back on Monday. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to make some live calls to our government officials and some higher authorities that are involved in the trooper Enrique Delgado-Garcia case. And maybe we can ask some answers. I don't think we're going to get far. We might get a lot of voicemails and a lot of hangups, but we're going to try. So I'll see you guys back here on Monday at 1:00 p.m. And that's going to end the show. So everybody have a great night, and I'll talk to everybody soon. Peace.